Thank you, Mario, for inviting me to the seminar. In fact, it's very useful for me to listen all these debates. We are in these discussions in Colombia too. Maybe in less than 1 month, we will take many decisions related to communications and transparency. So let me say 2 or 3 things about Colombia and about the central bank. First of all, is the institution that generates more trust in the country by far. In all the surveys, the central bank comes as the institution that generates more trust. Second, just by historical reasons, which I don't understand but are very useful, cultural activities are under the heading of the central bank. So everybody loves the central bank, but not because the monetary policy. Third, in a sense, is a very independent central bank. I am appointed by the board, not by the Colombian president. That's the good news. On the other hand, the Minister of Finance is in the board, and he votes. And I understand it's one of the few countries in the world in which the Minister of Finance votes. That was very useful when Colombia decreased inflation from 30% to 3%. It took like 15 years. But now, for all these issues related with communication and transparency, is difficult because the minister is there, and it conditions many decisions. Fifth, the regulator is outside of the central bank, and I think that's very useful too. Listening to Governor Powell or to other governors, they tell you that having the regulator inside the central bank creates lots of confrontation with banks and with many institutions, which happily we don't have in Colombia. And finally, Colombian is, like Chile, another happy floater. And we have been floating since 1999, almost freely and almost without much intervention. So let me tell you some things about transparency and communications. As they were saying this morning, high transparency helps to support central bank independence. If market expectations are coordinated around the central bank targets, effectiveness of monetary policy is increased. Higher predictability of monetary policy increases central bank credibility. In turn, higher credibility gives more flexibility to monetary policymakers. And finally, a point that Walsh does for England, responsibility to economic history is also important. And I think that's another important issue related to transparency and credibility. Now, let me talk about transparency and credibility in Colombia. When you look at these Eichengreen and the papers, Colombia doesn't do very well, which means there's room for improvement. The other thing is that we improve a lot and then we have been decreasing. I don't understand very well why. I have to find out the particular details about Colombia. So there is room for improvement according to all these measures. The other thing is that policy surprises have been high compared to other countries. So that's a tricky business because interest rates were going up and coming down a lot compared, for example, with Chile and with Peru. So when they tell us that policy surprises are very large, you say, well, if you have stable rates, it's much easier not to have policy surprises. But policy surprises come high. The other thing is that when you look at the impact of U.S. policy on short-term policy rate on our rates, short-term policy rates is very small. So because we float, we can manage our policy, monetary policy. That's one thing. But the other thing is that long-term rates move very closely with the U.S. rates. So it seems to mean that we don't have much impact on those rates. We recently had an evaluation of coming from the Central Bank of Sweden, and they told us you have very good judgment and the models and the deliberation are good, but communications are awful, accountability is yellow, learning yellow, and cost efficiency yellow. So again, lots of things to do. What are the things we are doing these days? First of all, concentrated a lot on the inflation report. It's much more forward-looking than before. We are going to publish all the basic variables that, like gaps, projections about the exchange rate, and all that. And there are lots of things that we can improve. For example, publishing the inflation report the same day that we communicate our decisions. Things like that, we are moving onwards. Now, there is this debate about the path of the interest rates, and we have been debating that for years, and I suppose it's the same debate everywhere. I was recently at the BIS meetings, and it was very funny because we were discussing with the governor of Norway, and he said they published the path and that they feel very comfortable with that because poor Mr. Powell, he said, because all these cameras are looking at his face. If he moves his eyes this way or that way, it means they are going to increase rates. So he said, we don't have that problem. We just publish the path, and that's it. But however, we decided not to publish the path because it's very tricky. And so far, in fact, Colombia had published the path before, long time ago, but we stopped. And these days we decided not to do it. What we are going to do better is to the technical staff will discuss what markets are seeing, and then the governor will say if he agrees or not with the technical staff, trying to see biases in one or the other direction. Finally, there are many questions that we still have to face. For example, if I talk as governor, what about my personal views? Because I represent the board, so should I talk all the time the consensus in the board? And if there is no consensus? Second, what to do about my other co-directors in the board? Maybe they talk too much. And if they talk about monetary policy, should all we be synchronized? Should we give the same message? What about the way each of these guys votes? So far, what we do is just publish the vote, but not person by person. So, for example, 5 votes pro increasing rates, 4 votes against. And we try to explain the discussion, but we don't publish person by person vote. And of course, we have discussions about how to face different public, So we go to talk to business people every 6 months to many Colombian cities. That's very useful. They learn how the central bank thinks, and we get lots of information from them. But we don't talk to the unions, for example. So should we do that? We had this TV program to talk to the broad public, but we are not very sure if that's very useful. We don't know very well how people react to that and how to communicate with the broad public. And finally, there is always the discussion about publication of the minutes and the discussions in the board. So far, after 15 years, they are published, but maybe we should bring that much shorter periods. So we are learning. I think we have to improve, and in every area, there are many things to do that can be done better. Thank you very much.